So I'm going to start doing these car line videos I've been seeing because I don't have enough followers on my other social media yet, but I'm trying to get there. So the more I get on TikTok, then the more I can get it on YouTube and Facebook. It's crazy. I didn't even know you had to do all this stuff. But my name's Olivia Reynolds. I am the owner of Healing Hearts Trauma, and I am trying to promote and advocate about psychology topics and to help kind of stop some of this pop psychology stuff that's going on of these self-proclaimed healers or coaches that might have a little bit of information or went and took a little quick course and they got some of it, but they haven't studied development and other things like we have, those of us that spent many years in the field studying it fully. So my hopes are to connect with you and teach you some things. Today, the topic is going to be on attachment, my most favorite thing, which is also in pop psychology right now. Everyone's an attachment theorist or therapist or coach or whatever. And there are some good things out there, and there are a lot of bad things out there about it. The great thing to learn about attachment is that it's ingrained in every single one of us. I have been given the book of life, and you have been given the book of life, right? Do you remember that game we played? We spin a little wheel and you got in a little car and you hopped around the board, right? And you went through all these things like a career and a career switch and a job, and then you had kids and you got married and all that stuff. Well, imagine if both of us had separate rules and instruction manuals to the game of life. We're probably going to have a little bit of issues. So the attachment theory is based upon developmentally Erik Erikson's theories, as well as John Piaget and many of the other developmentalists, looking at like if children do not attach appropriately to these lovely people who we think are gods when we're born and get the appropriate rearing and emotional support from them, we're likely going to have some type of psychological response as well as neurological response, which is where I get into the trauma aspect of things. And this is where some of these coaches don't really explain as I study trauma, right? So our nervous system gets overstimulated and overwhelmed, and because of that, we lie on this neurodivergent line that every single one of us also have too, where we're either going to fight, flight, freeze, or fawn in these situations because of these lovely people that were given to us by chance, happenstance, right? So there are 3 attachment styles, actually 4, because the 4th is secure. Sometimes we can look secure, especially if we're an avoidant, and I know how to spot them out like anything, because they will always answer everything perfectly because they're unaware of their attachment issues, because they're used to avoiding themselves, right? So how do we break this down to understand the psychological aspects of it and the cool spots of it without boring you to death? So imagine this. I always paint scenarios in therapy when I see my patients. You are a happy, vibrant little kid, and your main needs as a child is to be fed, held, your diaper changed, and soothed at some point, right? It's pretty simple. People are like, oh, she has motherly instinct. She's so whatever. I hate to tell you, it's really that simple when we're little. But now this little said baby has a lot more needs than change me, hold me, feed me, right? It's a lot more complex. Little Johnny's 6 or 7 years old, right? And he is playing with his favorite toy of all time, and suddenly this toy breaks, and he really doesn't understand that it's not his fault or why he's so emotionally upset about this. And if he doesn't have the proper support through this stage, he's going to feel some type of way about it. Emotionally either withdraw because no one really gave a shit, or emotionally become erratic about it, right? Overly emotional. You see those kids throwing tantrums and mom's like, I get so emotional. I don't even know what to do with him. Well, because he's never been shown what to do with his feelings. So he outwardly expresses it. Watch the movie Inside Out. That's the perfect example of feelings being expressed on the outside, right? Emotions are what's exterior, what we see out here. And that's why it's important when we're talking to people that we can see them in their face, because we're not going to know what people are feeling and thinking because they're not going to tell us. It's not ingrained in us to walk up to each other and say, hey, how are you feeling today? Because most of the time we're busy and we don't really care what people are feeling, because it would put me in an awkward situation if you said, I'm feeling really depressed. I mean, like, oh, that's great, Susan. Hope you feel better. Yeah, we just don't talk about it. Remember those rules to the game of life? Each one of us were handed separate instructions. So these attachment things I talk about, they're very, very interesting. We have the anxious attacher, the avoidant attacher, and the lovely combined of the two, which is the most interesting, is the fearful avoidant. The fearful avoidant is the pendulum swinger between the two, depending on their attachment core wounds that we'll talk about in future sessions when I break it down for each one. And then future sessions, I'll tell you about how we can do the steps of healing, and then hopefully get you interested enough where you want to work on this on yourself. The goal is to learn about your attachment wounds, the core wounds, figure out where they came from so that we can softly understand ourselves, better communicate, build more intimacy with ourselves and others, and get our emotional needs met. That's what we all want. We want to connect with humans. We want to connect with people. We want to live like hermits, keep to ourselves, and be busy workaholics, right? When we talk about the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, right? The flighters are constantly busy, 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 busy. Or the other dissociator, which is the freeze type, they're prone to substance abuse, domestic violence, as well as just staying busy in their head or other places, dissociating. So we don't want any of those. Those are maladaptive behaviors. They're not healthy in a relationship, and they will cause friction and burnout, and you just won't get your emotional needs met. And you'll end up in these relationships wondering, like, man, what happened there? Why can't I just find someone and whatever, right? Because they're ingrained in us, and we just got to learn about them. And they're rather interesting, as I said. The instruction manuals are different for each of us, as well as how our nervous system handles it. So back to little Johnny quickly as I try to. He's 6 or 7 years old. Here's a prime example of emotional wounds and triggered responses. His mom is cooking breakfast, bacon and eggs, and he's smelling it. Remember, neurodivergent, the 5 senses are activated. Smells great. He's playing. He's calm. His nervous system's calm. In walks Dad. Hey, Becky, did you pay the electric bill? I just got a disconnection notice. And she's like, yeah, Bob, I'm pretty certain I did, but I mean, maybe I didn't. Well, God bless it. And he's just getting tense and aroused, and he's upset. And little Johnny's like seeing his mother that he loves upset, and he can sense her like starting to, Bob, everything's going to be fine, right? She's starting to try to wind him down, and he doesn't care, and he's walking around the house. Oh, everything's always just so fucking, you never pay the bills on time. Excuse my French, but this is the reality of family. And when we think of trauma, they're like, trauma is physical abuse and sexual abuse. No, it's not. Complex situations and how everyone handles stress differently. So little Johnny's just like, I don't know what to do here. I need to make this better because I'm just trying to play with my toys and eat breakfast. Shit, this is craziness. So Johnny walks over to Mom and says, wow, Mom, you look really pretty today. Do you want me to help you cook breakfast? Insert the fawn. Or he might be like, hey, Dad, can I tell you a funny joke? Insert the jester, the court jester. And the family systems theory, we look at the enabler, the scapegoat, the rebel, the jokester, et cetera, et cetera. And the attachment theory we call, and then the trauma response we call this the fawn type. Anywho, so 20 years later, Johnny doesn't remember the situation because our brains are so innately wired with so many memories that happen throughout the day, thousands. There's no way. But the amygdala remembers, and the prefrontal cortex remembers, and the hindsight, which is short-term memories here, long-term memories here, it remembers all that stuff, but you don't. 30 years later, Johnny's sitting down, and his girlfriend suddenly starts cooking bacon and eggs. And he's like, oof, I feel really nauseous right now. And he starts to shut down. And she's like, what's the matter? And he's like, I don't know, but I don't feel like eating. Johnny doesn't remember that, but his brain does. And Johnny suddenly feels the stress from that situation when he was 7 years old, sitting there watching his parents fight and argue over the electric bill. This is how it starts, and this is how it's hot-wired in us. Check back in for more information and tips. I would love to meet with you and educate you on more. I'll be posting more videos and more content. This is just the opening of attachment. I'm going to post one on dismissives, as well as anxious and the fearful avoidance, and more on the trauma response. I'm Olivia Reynolds. I am a licensed professional counselor and PhD candidate, and I'm also the owner of Healing Hearts Trauma. Thanks.